Please don't air any of this, Brad.
All right, we ready? You hitting it? Tell me when we're rolling. So we've been rolling. God damn.
We're Googling over here.
All right.
To nerd sports now, people.
Exactly.
Look out. Do you fear death?
Oh, one of the greatest lines of all time.
I've got a job to it. I've got a job to it.
Kind of like whistles at her, and Dad looks over and the guy's going. And Dad's like, I got the fuck out of there. I was like, oh man, you didn't partake? I thought that was part of the mountain biking community, that y'all just went out there and had sex together in your tight shorts. But
Angrily making me 30 sides of red sauce. He just hangs it back up.
So that's what I was doing wrong the first time.
That's what you were doing wrong.
Big Pharma's turning the frogs gay, and it's coming after your kids.
And they're going to make them incredibly happy.
Infowars.com.
Listened to so much. Are you...
So this is episode 15.
15.
15?
I've only watched a couple. I watched the one, I think it was after the... All right, I watched. I didn't watch very much of that one. I watched the one with your mechanic.
Yeah.
About 30 minutes of that.
Yeah.
I actually listened to it more than I watched it.
Yeah.
I didn't realize these things were 2 hours long.
Oh, I didn't either. We started out just... I didn't know what it was going to be like.
Sure.
Thought we might, go for 30, 40 minutes. And then they've been hitting about 2 hours. So I don't know. Just depends. Just see how it goes.
See how it goes.
Yeah, but you, sir, are Rick Owens.
Yes, sir.
Who are you, sir?
Oh, I'm just, boy, I don't know. I grew up here in Prairie Grove. Good friends with your dad.
Yes, sir.
You know, when we were young, he walked in and took his seat off his chair first day of school with one arm, and we've been friends ever since. I thought, man, that guy, he just took that right down,
What class were you guys?
We were in first grade at that time. We were in Miss Doherty's first grade class.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
Still have connections like
1965. So.
What year did y'all graduate?
77.
7?
Yeah, 77.
Changed a little bit.
Oh, there's been a lot of changes in those years. It's amazing the difference between now and then. I mean, kids growing up, we didn't have any of the technology to play with or anything like that. We just rode bicycles. Ran around town or ran around the woods out at my house and, caught critters, turned over logs and see what was underneath them and stuff like that. I got a sound.
You're getting blown up already.
Yeah, I knew that was going to happen. I called a guy on the way. And
it's a good reminder to me. I got to turn my ringer off.
Yeah, I called because he's having a little party Saturday, and I called to see what it was. Well, he wasn't there, so it went to voicemail. Is that... I'll just turn the whole thing off.
Make sure you boost it all the way. I'll give you a little extra juice.
Okay.
So I hadn't seen you in a long time before Durham Fest 1. And I've seen you quite a few times since then.
Yeah.
Every time we get to talking, I feel like we don't have enough time to really get into it. You're obviously a very political dude.
Yeah.
When did you start really getting into politics?
First, probably, I didn't get into it much, but when Reagan ran, I could tell a difference between, Reagan's philosophies and Carter's, philosophies at the time.
You'd have been how old?
I was only about 21 or so at that time. And I really didn't pay much attention to it, didn't really care that much at the time. Started really paying attention more when Ross Perot ran, believe it or not.
Really?
I got to watch
in the 92 election?
Yeah. When he was running, I got to watch all the circle charts and, all the pie charts and all the kind of stuff. And I've always felt like, one of my great concerns for this country is our national debt.
Yeah.
And he was too, even then. I mean, it probably wasn't but $1 or $2 trillion at the time.
Right.
When Reagan took office, I think it was only like $200 billion.
Yeah.
So
that's hard to imagine.
It is
just a small number.
And I'd like to hear somebody try to explain how that's acceptable to continue to just go deeper and deeper and deeper. I mean, if we're going to spend 2-3 trillion every year that we don't have, when's it going to end? At what point do we say enough's enough? So it's
well, a lot of that's tied into the petrodollar, right? We make other countries exchange into U.S. currency, but now it looks like the BRICS nations are trying to get off of the U.S. currency, which is going to devalue the dollar a great deal. So I don't know how we can continue to keep printing money like this.
Yeah. And I guess the only way it happens is if people buy T-bills and bonds and things like that. And if people quit buying them, then we can't spend more than we make other than just printing money, I guess. I really don't know.
Are you familiar with Thomas Massey?
No.
He's a representative out of Kentucky, but he wears a digital counter of the national debt on his lapel that it's synced up to the Treasury, so you can constantly just see it going up.
Yeah. It's and people try and explain to me, how it's really not a big deal. The bills nobody can call the bills due and all this kind of stuff, but it's still something we're passing on to our kids. I mean, we didn't have that big bill. When I was born, 1959, I don't even know what the national debt was then, but if it was only $200 billion whenever, when Reagan took office, and it couldn't have been much in 59. And so, like I say, at some point you gotta wonder when it's gonna all come to a head.
Right.
So,
how do you feel like the 2024 election's shaping up? Just from the outside, it looks kind of like a landslide in favor of Trump right now.
It should. And then I heard a poll. I listened to talk radio in the morning. Fox News had a poll that showed Biden leading. 50-48 is what it was on the news this morning. And
nationally,
yeah, and I just can't believe that. It's whether you're a Trump supporter or not, if you're paying attention, you have to recognize that that Biden's declining. There's just no doubt.
Well, there's a difference between now and 2020.
Oh,
a
absolutely,
great difference.
Absolutely.
He could still stand and kind of speak in 2020.
Yeah.
I mean, he had that great line where he told Trump to shut up during the debate, which basically closed the deal right there. When Trump was being aggressive, that was kind of what the left wanted, was that standing up to Trump, and that was a good moment for him. But I don't think you got a debate next. It's a week from today.
Yeah.
How do you think that's going to go?
It depends on if they give him the same stuff they gave him for the State of the Union. He may do well. Who knows? I mean, I don't know what. You could tell he was supercharged for that event. I mean,
but even then, it wore off.
Yeah.
As the conversation progressed. So,
yeah.
I don't know how long he can go, but the last week or so, we've seen so many videos of him kind of stalling out and pausing. And I really feel bad for the guy.
Oh, I do too. I felt that way even 4 years ago. I thought, man, this is like almost elderly abuse or something like that. They're using him to, to get to somebody that they don't like, and that's the thing. It's hard for me to overlook is the people that just don't like Donald Trump.
Right.
And when you look at the people that don't like him, it's all the people that are in power and want to maintain that power, want to maintain that control.
Right.
And when you see those people that are attacking him, it's character assassination. It's a ploy that they use to, on anybody. Our media will jump on anybody they can to destroy their character, and
is it a little disturbing that our media is basically owned by corporate interests?
Oh,
absolutely. You got pharmaceutical companies are buying the ads. I mean, so you can really skew the narrative however you want.
I think that it's one of the biggest problems we have in this country is that we have information dominance by our media, and the way both sides of our media, whether you're watching the left-wing mainstream media or whether you're watching
Fox,
Fox, Fox is pretty one-sided a lot now too.
Yeah, for sure.
But even the other stuff, even talk radio and the stuff that does represent the right, you don't see them telling the whole story. sometimes. You know,
Yeah.
they all, it's like
Sure.
watching a trial, and all you hear is the defense attorney on one
Yep.
side, and all you hear is the prosecutor on the
Sure.
other side, and most people don't watch both.
Right.
Most people
That's
watch
true.
one side or they watch the other, and it could be, that's one of the ploys of any government that's trying to maintain control is to divide the people against
100%.
each other.
Yeah.
And they divide the people by, once again, everybody watches one side of the media or the other, and so now they fight about it because
So
this
they're both
side's
in an echo chamber.
yeah, this side's telling them one thing and this side's telling these people another, so they fight about it.
And
No,
both
no.
sides omit a lot of the actual facts.
Yeah.
Where do you get your media from? What do you listen to?
Oh, I mean, at home we watch a lot of just regular ABC, CBS, NBC. I rarely do CNN or MSNBC or
Right.
any of those, but you can't help but watch some ABC, CBS, NBC from time to time, and when you watch that stuff, it's really comical at times that the stuff that they ignore, the way they say things. I'm trying to think of an example of it, but they'll say something just like the Hunter Biden laptop.
Yeah. Good.
All right, you got 51 people that they all said it had all the earmarks of Russian disinformation.
Yeah.
Well, they didn't come out and say that it was Russian
Right.
disinformation. They are smart enough to use words,
Certain language.
that say, well, it's got the earmarks of this, and all the press, all the media can go with it and say it without actually lying,
Yeah.
but they are. Because they know the truth, yet
Well, I wonder.
gonna-
I've seen Chris Cuomo debate it. You familiar with Dave Smith? He's a libertarian. He's got a podcast. He's been on Rogan a couple times, but he debated Chris Cuomo not long ago, and I really feel like guys like that. I don't think they know the truth. I feel like they're brainwashed in a lot of cases. I feel like they've been fed the lie so many times about
Yeah.
certain things
Yeah.
that I think it was Goebbels, one of Hitler's
Sure.
lieutenants, that said, you know,
You
make
tell
a
it-
lie big, tell it off, and they'll believe it.
Yeah.
And I think that happens
Yeah.
to a lot of people.
tell a lie once, it stays a lie. If you tell it 1,000 times, it becomes the
It
truth.
becomes the truth. Yeah.
You know, that's
yeah, better way to say it. Yeah.
yeah. I think that was
Like some of
actually
these people are just indoctrinated, and I feel like, and I'm like you, I'm wary of both sides. I want to be able to find sources from
Yeah.
both sides and try and get perspective, because there's a lot of commonality, and I'm seeing a lot of people from the left and the right kind of converge in the middle. They might disagree on some
Oh.
policy, but as
Yeah.
far as getting to the truth of COVID and how we were lied to
Yeah.
about that, how we were lied to about the vaccines, farmers getting sued. Was it Tennessee that's suing them, or Kentucky? One of those states is suing them right now.
suing Pfizer and Moderna.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was just, I think that to this day is one of the most atrocious things that's ever been perpetrated on the American people, the world, really.
And you got to wonder there, once again, especially at that time, the economy was doing great, unemployment was low. I mean, there was not one economic indicator or any indicator of any kind that they could point the finger at Trump and say, no, you've got to go, we got to get rid of you.
Yeah.
And I hate to think that there are people, you know, in this country, in this world, that would allow something like that to happen, that would create something like that and allow it to escape and allow it to happen for the sole purpose of winning an election. But they had to create some kind of chaos. They had to. I mean, I think if COVID doesn't happen and the economy stays the way it does for another year, he'd have to win by 60, 70 points.
It is curious timing.
Yeah.
When that came out.
Yeah.
Literally the year before an election.
And
right.
and you know, the way a lot of that stuff was presented, the ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine and all that stuff, once again going back to our press, the press just, anybody that believes in that stuff is just, you going to take horse wormer, you going to do this? I mean,
Right.
it was just,
See, that's an
demonized.
example, I think, of people not knowing the truth. I think the people who are behind the desk are just told what to say
Yeah.
by the producers
Yeah.
who write the script, and then they're just reading off a teleprompter.
Yeah.
They're not doing their
Yeah.
own research.
No.
They're just
There's-
being fed whatever the narrative is, and they're getting the paycheck.
Yeah.
So
They're actors and actresses.
Why
is all they are,
question
and that's why they all say the same things. You know, Limbaugh used to do that all the time. He'd play a parody of every, you know, every news outlet in the whole country, and they were all saying exactly the same thing. The walls are closing in on
Yeah.
Trump. The wall, I mean, you know, just different things like that, and they just, you know, but.
do you like Trump, or do you tolerate him and think he's just the better option?
I think he's a good manager. I really do.
Yeah.
That's the thing. I mean, whether I like his personality and the way he, I wish he would control himself a little better at times. You know what I mean? But by the same token, I might drink one of those if you have an extra.
Yes, sir.
Be better than water. But like I say, I do wish that he would be more electable, if you will, sometimes.
I feel like he's learned that lesson, though. He's been a lot
He's-
tamer
Yes.
this time around. I think he's got some better people around him.
I agree. He's watched himself a lot better this time around, and that goes back to our press. They were talking about how he shouldn't say things about our judges, and he shouldn't be saying that kind of stuff. At the same time, Biden's talking about the Supreme Court
Right.
and all the things that they're doing.
Well, it's such a double standard
know.
for what the left can do versus the right, and I don't really look at things in terms of left and right anymore, because I feel like they're both bought by the same
Yeah.
lobbyists or corporations or
Bankers.
bankers, the military-industrial complex.
Right.
They bet on both sides.
Right.
They fund both sides
Oh,
of the
yeah.
campaign, so it doesn't really matter to them who wins. They just keep us distracted
Yeah.
with things like abortion and
Sure.
border control and,
Yeah.
and things like that we can fight about, but we have no idea what's
Yeah.
really going on in
Yeah.
the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, the division part of it's very real, and that's Alinsky wrote about that in Rules for Radicals. You know, and that's the playbook that I know Hillary wrote on it.
Yeah.
Obama wrote a lot of stuff on Rules for Radicals. You know, they both went to college there in Chicago, where he taught.
Right.
And the division part of it is it's a key step.
It seems like before Trump, you could find a commonality with somebody on the other side if it were, and still talk about motorcycles or whatever it is that you have in common, and you just leave the politics out of it. But now I feel like people have such visceral reactions to Trump that they almost, well, you're familiar with the term TDS,
Oh, yeah.
arrangement syndrome,
Yeah.
where you just hate him
Yeah.
so much you can't even
And-
think rationally.
And if you mention that to somebody, I've got Facebook friends that are liberals, and we try to talk, you know, civilly. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, they're still good friends.
Sure.
But you mentioned TDS, and it's a trigger. Boy, I mean, it's like, no,
Oh, is it?
Oh, yeah. It's like, no, that's just
Really?
okay. You know, you're making
So
my
they prove
point
your
here.
point? Yeah,
But
exactly.
that's it's kind of funny to listen sometimes, and usually whenever I'm dealing with somebody, when we're conversing on Facebook, you know, it's hard to get the personality through and really what you meant, but usually I just ask questions. You know, I'll ask questions. So you think that, and see what they say, and I don't know. It's not worth losing friendships and things like that.
It's really not.
It's not.
It's really not at all, and it's sad that we've gotten to a point where people are choosing their political ideologies over the people they care about.
Mhm. Well, I think a lot of people felt. I mean, I've been since Ross Perot. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, we need a businessman to run our country.
Right.
I mean, somebody that's been a politician their whole life, all they really know how to do is get reelected
Right.
and
Raise money for campaigns.
Yeah, raise money for campaigns, and how to
And do what the
shuffle
donors want
dollars.
to do.
You know, yeah, exactly. Do what
Yeah.
they're told to do.
Yeah.
But you get somebody in there that's a businessman that's run companies, and I learned a lot listening to pros infomercials on things. Just You know, I mean, he had the philosophy: if you want to run Ford Motor Company, you go to work on the assembly line.
Right.
You go to work on the assembly line, you sweep the floor, you do whatever, you do every job, and then you're qualified.
Right.
And it's the same way with, running a country. I mean, you got to know the tax burdens that are on people and all that kind of stuff that makes it viable for a company to come in and stay in Michigan instead of moving to Mexico where the rules are a lot easier.
Right.
So I think that was a big. We've got too much of our work that has been shipped out, and that started a long time ago.
Yeah. So Ross Perot was that the first election where you really started getting involved in things?
That's the first one I actually voted in. Yeah,
Was
I
it?
actually
You've
took
been how old there? 92?
32, I think.
Early
yeah,
30s. Okay.
Yeah, 32.
Do you have
And-
kids by then?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. I had one.
So you
My
got
my
a
son was born in 32 or in 92, and I was 32.
Did that have anything to do with it? Having a child?
I don't know whether that had much to do with it or not. Maybe. I mean, it is a life-changing experience.
Yeah.
You know, it does.
Well, it shifts your focus from yourself to the future.
Indeed.
For them.
Indeed, and that's what that's one of the things I focused on. You know, the national debt was being a big
Yeah.
issue in my. You know, why we can't have a balanced budget, why we can't have simpler tax laws. You know, we don't need a tax book that's,
Yeah.
that thick. It could all be so much simpler to where people actually understood it, and if we need more money coming in next year, you take another % from everybody or whatever it takes. You balance the budget.
Right.
And I don't see it being that hard to do, but nobody seems to want to in Washington anyway.
Well, I think a lot of people are getting rich.
Yeah.
I don't think they care about. I think a lot of people start out with good intentions,
Sure.
but then they start getting offered insane amounts of money,
Yeah.
or they get compromised.
Yeah.
We got a picture of you doing this. You
Yeah.
wouldn't want your family to find this out.
Oh, yeah. I heard that in '92 when Clinton was running, and it was like, how can somebody with as many skeletons in his closet? Because even as governor of Arkansas, he had a lot of skeletons in his closets.
Sure.
I mean, there was a lot of rumors around this state.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Absolutely.
And somebody much older and wiser told me, said, it's about the only way you can become president in this country is if they have something on you and they can control you. And I thought, wow, that's it just ain't right for one thing.
That's the
But-
one thing I love the most about Trump is that
Mhm.
I don't feel like he can be bought.
Right.
I've thought this for a long time.
Right.
Love or hate the guy, I don't think he can be
Yeah.
controlled.
Right.
And they hate that.
And I like to believe that, and I like to, I've become pretty cynical about believing anything anymore.
I
And
believe
like to-
everything and nothing at the same time.
Exactly.
almost, yeah.
It's one of those things that I love to believe that Trump really is on our side and he wants to do what's best for the, but then at the same token, it's like he could be another actor just like everybody else. He could be part of the whole
Absolutely.
show.
Right.
And I wouldn't be any the wiser.
But even so, and I've had the same discussion with some people who are anti-Trump. Let's just say he is a selfish egomaniac. If it's what's best for America, I don't really care what his motivations are.
Yeah, the things that he was doing his first 3 years in office before COVID pretty much became the only thing anybody was worried about,
Yes.
for a year, seemed to be working. We were, the GDP was going up, stock market was going up,
Sure.
unemployment was down. Everything seemed to be working really well. And I'd sure like to see it go that way again. We didn't have any wars.
No,
Yeah.
that's my biggest.
Ukraine and Russia weren't battling.
They waited till
Why?
right after he got out.
Yeah. Signed some peace treaties in the Middle East, which had
The Abraham
never
Accords.
happened.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it's
Do you think he sees jail time? What do you think happens with the sentencing?
I don't see it.
Really?
I
Why
really
not?
don't. It's all about optics, I think. I believe that if they sentence him to jail time, that it will beef up his side, that it was all unjust and all that kind of stuff. So
So you think they've recognized that this is all backfiring?
well, maybe.
Because he was not popular before they raided Mar-a-Lago. I mean,
Mhm.
he was almost taboo
Yeah.
to even talk about. People
Yeah.
were terrified to admit they supported Trump. And then after
Mhm.
Mar-a-Lago, I think you had kind of some
Well-
people going, what is going on here?
Well,
And then you had, of course, you had the Biden documents, that same situation. He had documents
Sure.
at his home.
sure.
Then it turns out the FBI rearranged the documents from Trump and put them in different orders, and I mean they tampered with evidence basically. So
Sure.
it ends up like in all these trials, the people prosecuting him end up being more corrupt than the crime they're prosecuting.
That's
You know, Fannie Willis and
Oh,
Jack
yeah.
Smith and all kinds of
Yeah.
shenanigans.
yeah.
People stepping down from DOJ to go to state prosecutions to go after.
I
It's
mean,
wild.
he got 34 felony convictions, and I don't know anybody that's ever been able to explain to me what his real crime was. What did he do? Did he filled out had some paperwork errors? That he called something one thing and it wasn't? It was
Well,
something
the way
else?
I understand it is that in order to get Stormy Daniels to sign an NDA, they paid her $130,000 or whatever it was, and Michael Cohen paid that to her from
Yeah.
his own funds.
Sure.
And then Trump reimbursed him through
Yeah.
however many months as legal fees. So
Mhm.
you're paying a lot. It's not illegal to pay hush money.
Right.
It's not illegal. Well, I mean, I don't see any of it that's illegal, but they're saying that it was done to conceal another crime, which is election interference.
Well,
Which
yeah.
they do a good job of pointing
But
the finger
once-
at what
but-
they're doing.
Yeah, but once again, it's just he paid it in this ledger column
Right.
and should have paid it in this ledger column, and for that he gets 34 felony counts.
But for paying a woman off to not talk about an affair seems to me like a much smaller crime than fabricating the Russian collusion hoax,
Oh, sure.
which we know that Hillary was behind.
Mm-hmm.
But nobody seems to care. It's the
No.
double standard that bothers me.
Yeah.
And there are people on the left that say, "Yeah, go after all of them."
Well,
But then I don't know if that's a good thing either.
I'm a lot there. I'm an anti-corruption kind of guy.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm one of these guys that those people. You talk about even policemen and stuff like that.
Sure.
If you're a law enforcement officer, you should be held to a higher standard than the people you're protecting
Yeah,
and
I like
serving.
that.
I mean,
Yeah.
you really should. I mean, you know the law. You know, for you to break it is, you know, to put yourself above the law
sure.
is wrong, and that's what all of them seem to do up there. They're above the law. They know they're untouchable.
Right.
Um,
I feel like if they had something legitimate on Trump, they would have dug it out 8 years ago. Why is it taking them this long? They're up jumping
He's-
misdemeanors that are out of date into felonies so they can bring them back. I mean, it's
he's probably the most investigated person in the history of the world.
absolutely without
I
a
mean, you know, they've looked for it, dug for it.
doubt. Yeah.
You know, I mean,
And have had to fabricate
I could,
things.
yeah. That's the thing is that they keep coming up with stuff and nothing seems to stick. Whereas on the other hand, all of Hillary's emails, they had evidence that she, you know,
Yeah.
they subpoenaed her emails and she just
Destroyed
you
the
know,
hard
destroyed
drives.
them all.
Yeah.
So, you know, why is that acceptable? Yet, you know, a paperwork error gets you 34 felony convictions.
Well, the Hunter Biden laptop, I think you were talking about this earlier when the language they use. It has all the
Earmarks,
earmarks
of Russian.
They didn't say it was.
Right. And
But they, you know, the X files that came out from, or the Twitter files that came out when Elon bought Twitter.
Mhm.
The fact that the federal government was
Oh, yeah.
contacting social media and telling them to ban stories and ban
Yeah.
accounts promoting
Yeah.
those stories.
Sure.
And to me, whether there were election shenanigans or not, that is election interference
Mhm.
caused
Oh.
by the government
Oh, absolutely.
censoring stories through
To-
social media.
To put out the story that laptop was not Hunter's, and it had all the earmarks of Russian disinformation, all that kind of stuff. Ashley Biden's diary. They
Yeah.
tried to kill that. They said, no, that's not really her diary. Well, it came up in a court case, and they had to admit
Yeah,
she
it's been
actually
authenticated.
testified.
Yeah.
She testified under oath that yes, it's my diary. Well, if it's really your diary, And it says in there that your father was, kind of a,
Creep.
kind of a creep. I mean, that's...
Well, there's so much footage of Joe Biden saying racist things, and
Mhm.
I mean, over the years.
Yeah.
And yet, I honestly, it's a great job of projection
Mhm.
or gaslighting. This is the crazy person over here, while you're literally doing
Sure.
the thing you're accusing
Sure.
the other side of doing.
Yeah.
It's a great tactic, and it
Mhm.
works.
Oh, yeah.
But I feel like the people on the right don't fight back.
But
at
that's
all.
what I'm getting at. If we had a free and fair press that would address both sides of the issue like that would say, well, yes, this is bad, but also this is bad, and
Sure.
let's expose the truth here, not your version of the truth or your version.
Yeah,
'Cause-
just the truth.
yeah,
Well, how do you get there? You have to eliminate corporations because they're going to have an agenda. The government obviously can't control the media. How do you get a fair and balanced media back?
it's and once again, to get an FCC license, you're going to have to do something.
Jump through some hoops.
Yeah, you're going to have to have
Somebody's
some
gonna
people on your
yeah,
side.
100%.
And they're probably going to explain to you the rules that say, there's certain things you can say or can't say, and they're not going to just tell you we're going to pull the plug on you or something like
Right.
that, but they're going to tell you that things are going to be a lot easier if you just, play the game the way it's been being played. And I don't know if there is an answer there other than if somebody, had enough money where they, once again, you still got to get FCC approval and all that kind of stuff. But I know the way it is right now. I mean, I've watched it enough. I watch it and I shake my head that, some of the stuff George Stephanopoulos says in the morning and all this other stuff, they tell you one side of it. But I've listened to Chris Plant on the other side and some of these other guys, and I know that's not really what was said.
Yeah.
But here they are telling you that as for truth.
Yeah. I've found it, at least in this space and time, there's a lot of podcasters out there who are, I feel like, not bought and paid for. Joe Rogan's a great example. He was not political at all up until 2020. And then he said on a podcast, my doctor gave me ivermectin and I was good within a day.
Sure.
And CNN runs a story on him, and they tinted his skin green to make him look sick on the air.
Yeah.
And it really pissed him off because I think he was like most people. I don't care. It didn't really affect me.
Yeah.
And then it affected him personally. And then he's like, CNN's lying about me.
Yeah,
This is
intentionally, deliberately.
lying. That was intentional. That wasn't just,
sure.
that was
that wasn't an
deceptive.
accident.
No, and ivermectin obviously has won Nobel Prize for efficacy in humans. I mean, it's not horse dewormer. I mean, it can be used.
Sure it is.
But
It's
that's,
a great
again, that
horse
snaky
dewormer,
kind of
but
language.
yeah.
Sure, it can be used for horses, but that's not what he was taking.
Yeah.
He was taking something prescribed by a doctor.
It's antiviral for all animals.
But the whole fact that Pfizer and all these other companies could basically seal documents for 75 years, they were beyond reproach. So if any side effects, then they can't be sued. I mean, there were so many protections. It just felt wrong. It just didn't seem right. None of it felt right, and everybody was just so quick to get in line and do what's right, save your fellow America. But just the common sense of, if you got the vaccine, then you're protected, right? They said it was safe and effective. So why should I need to get it? If you got it, then you're protected.
Yeah. How am I hurting you?
Right.
Anyway, I mean, that's nothing.
None of it ever made sense. If you thought about it logically, even for 1 second.
Yeah. Even the flu shot, we've argued about that for years. That if you got the flu shot, why do you care whether I got one or not? I mean, if I get the flu, I get the flu. It's not that big a deal.
Yeah.
I've lived through flu before.
Did you get COVID?
I never did. Never got COVID. My son did. I knew a lot of people that did. One of them, or several, were, it's a bad disease. There's no doubt about it. I'm not trying to sugarcoat that or minimize that by any stretch. But
Well, I still don't think we know all the ramifications of it. It was so new. I truly believe it was engineered. I mean, we were obviously doing gain-of-function research paid for by the USA in Wuhan.
Yeah.
And that information was available back then. That was available in 2020.
But it was a conspiracy then.
But it was a conspiracy.
At that time, the press continued to call out it came from a bat at a wet market. And I've argued with a lot of people that just, well, no, that's the way it was. And, it's
What's your thoughts on UFOs?
Oh, I don't think we're alone. You know,
Do you think we have alien craft that we're reverse engineering, or do you think a lot of these, like congressional hearings about these TikToks or Tic Tacs devices that are going insane speeds, up, down, left, right, faster than a drone? Do you think that's some kind of alien technology, or do you think that's just military weaponry that we're testing on our own military?
Boy, I hope it's just alien technology. I really don't know. I mean, it's one of those things
You'd
that,
rather it be alien technology.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Why do you say that?
yeah, I mean, I have faith in God for one thing. I don't believe that the world's going to come to an end by a alien invasion or anything like that. It's a lot more likely that it's going to happen from governments around the world. As they come together, the New World Order, one world order. I believe once we're getting close to the end, whenever we don't have all these different money sources and all that kind of stuff, it'll come to that eventually. I believe to where we have one world money system.
Yeah.
And I mean, it says, Revelation says, it would be no man will be able to buy or sell anything without the mark of the beast. And he's talking about no man, no, the whole world. Nobody's going to buy or sell anything without this mark of the beast. And whatever that beast is, I mean, I don't know.
You've obviously read Revelation. I've read it many times. I feel like the more I read it, the more confused I am by it.
Yeah.
Do you believe it's a predictor of things to come, or do you think it was something that was written to represent what was happening in its day?
I've got friends that believe that everything that was in Revelation's already happened.
Right. Yeah.
But I've
heard those arguments.
I don't buy it. I don't believe that. I don't believe that we've ever seen a point where, like, once again, no man. I'm not talking about just the people in Israel, or whatever. We're talking about worldwide, and I believe that, the world. There will come a time, and Jesus said the gospel will be preached to every nation. I mean, it's going to come to a point where communication is one thing that's just grown in leaps and bounds, and there will come a time, I think, where even the most native countries and stuff like that will have internet, and they'll have, all the stuff. They'll know everything, and I think they'll all be governed by one world power.
Well, there's certainly a push for that now.
Yeah.
Are these government, like we'll call them globalists, for lack of a better term? That's what they
Bankers.
are. Bankers. Yeah. You look at Star Trek, though, which Star Trek, The Next Generation, and every planet you go to is a world government, right?
Mm-hmm.
They've solved all these things. Mm-hmm. Could there maybe be a benefit in globalism that we're not seeing if resources were shared? Or
it's the age-old battle of good versus evil,
right?
I mean, if
like
it's a benevolent New World Order, then that's all great. We're all gonna, sit around and sing Kumbaya, and it's all great.
Yeah.
But on this earth, I mean, the battle's always been. I mean, from the Garden of Eden till now, we've got good versus evil.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem. That's the problem with, like, communism. I think works on a small scale, like within a family or a small neighborhood or out in the country.
Yeah.
You barter for resources. I trade you some eggs for some tractor work, right? We all pitch in, and everybody knows each other, and you have a vested interest in your neighbors and your family. Mm-hmm. But it's when communism is extrapolated onto a big government, then somebody's in charge of those resources. Those people can be corrupted.
Yeah.
Right. And then those resources are obviously misused.
Even when the Mayflower landed, they used communism for the first year or two, and they almost starved to death.
Really?
And then they did like what you did. Well, I'm gonna take care of my stuff. They started divvying up land, and everybody had their own deal, and went more to a capitalist type, deal. But it worked a lot better once they all started taking care of their own stuff. But
there's a lot of evils with capitalism too.
Well, sure there is. I mean, there's
the corruption within capitalism, and and what it leads to is pretty damn evil from my perspective.
It depends. I mean, there's a lot of people that just think the rich should pay more and more and more, and I'm really not opposed to people being rich via hard work and enterprise.
Sure.
And if you started a company and you got 1,000 employees, and you're taking care of those employees well, and you're making billions, that's all great.
Yeah.
And it's the corruption part of it
Yeah.
that gets me. As long as everybody's on the up and up, as long as that money's in the private sector, I don't care. They're going to reinvest it.
Right.
Those people, I mean, trickle down economics. People say it just doesn't work. But if you leave the money in the private sector instead of the government, then those people will reinvest it into other companies and hire more people, and the GDP goes up, and they just swear that, oh no, that never works. Well, it worked during the Reagan administration.
Right.
It did well, and the economy grew, and the GDP increased, and I know I felt a lot better when interest rates went from 17% down to a lot lower.
Yeah, I've heard stories about the interest rates back then, and it's wild to see how high they are now.
Mm-hmm.
And we got our loans at a
Yeah,
very opportune time, and that's what things you don't think about. Sometimes you just get lucky where you are in your life, where the economy is, and
Yeah.
when you have things that are happening in your life. We got lucky finding the land out here, and we wouldn't have been able to afford the house a couple of years later. With the lumber price, COVID happened, and the lumber prices,
Oh, yeah.
all that stuff started going up,
Yeah.
just to insane amounts. And now just to get a loan, it just is a
Yeah.
terrifying prospect.
But you're talking about capitalism and evil and stuff like that. I mean, home builders that were building 5 years ago were building it at this price. Well, then lumber prices and material prices they double and triple, and
Yeah.
so, well, the price of the house is coming up.
Sure.
Then when it cycles back down, does the price of the house come back down? It's that. I mean, I'm all for people making a fair wage and a profit on their returns,
Yeah.
things like that. But that can be, you can, and the market usually takes care of that.
The market
other
should
people,
speak, yeah.
Other
Yeah.
people will start selling for less, and so
Right.
these people have to come down to match up.
But there's a lot of outside vested interest in controlling the market as well. But yeah, if you just let the market speak, it's uninfluenced. I
Sure.
think that is probably the best system. But there's a lot of outside influence into it.
Yeah.
We were talking last night. My buddy Jason Stillwell was over. We were talking about, kind of Trump. He's not a big Trump fan either. But we were talking about, or I was talking about how you're a New York businessman. And I don't know if you've met many New Yorkers, but they're very, kind of brash,
Blunt.
outspoken, blunt kind of
very
people.
blunt.
I mean, he's just seems to me like a typical New Yorker. And when you're dealing with contractors trying to fuck you all the time, and you're wanting to save a dollar,
Yeah.
you're wanting to get a value for things.
Yeah.
He's a shrewd businessman, and I think that translates well into politics.
Oh,
I-
especially to run in a country. Not necessarily the politics of getting elected
Right.
and the politics of charming people and stuff like that.
Right.
But that's what I'm saying, when it comes down to saying the X's and O's
Right.
of, okay, you're going to move your company to Mexico. How about if we do this?
Yeah.
And we drop your taxes to this. We get you keep these 1,000 employees here working, and we get it to where it's profitable for you to stay here. And then the government reaps the benefits of the income taxes and stuff like that from that 1,000 employees that were
Yeah.
going to go down here,
Yeah.
paying into the general fund. I mean, it's relatively simple math, probably. If you
One would
look at
think.
it, if you look at it, and
But I would rather know what I'm getting. I feel like I know the real Trump. I feel like what you see is
Oh, I
what
do
you
too.
get. Whereas with these politicians, there's no telling. It's a persona. I'm just tired of that.
that's
And the federal government has gotten so bloated and so dangerous and terrifyingly totalitarian. I just want somebody to shake it up and tear it down.
Well,
To a point where we can.
That's my big goals. Balance the budget. Start working on the national debt a little bit. End corruption of all forms.
But how can you ever even tackle that task?
first thing, if I were Donald Trump and I got reelected, everyone must go. I don't care who you are.
Okay, let's talk about the FBI.
Yeah, that's.
So, would you eliminate the branch or just get rid of everybody and start over? Because they probably do a lot to protect us we don't know about. I know
Well,
it's easy to say there's corruption there.
I'm just talking about starting at the top.
Okay.
And getting however many people it takes in there that you think you can trust, and that will let you know what's going on. I mean,
but how long can that last?
I don't know. I mean, if you're a good enough judge of character and stuff like that, I mean, I think if you're talking with these people, you're talking with the head of the FBI every day. I get a pretty good feeling when somebody's lying to me. You know, I can tell. You ask enough questions, it's like watching ABC in the morning. You know, it's like, well, I don't know if I quite, you know, I hear what you're saying. I know why you're saying it, but, you know, I also know that there's other stories saying the contrary. And it's gross receipts audits. You know, the IRS, I've been through one. I probably wasn't making $8,000-$10,000 a year in 1989. And they hit me with a gross receipts audit that said that I had deposited more money into my checking account than I showed as income. Well, every time I sold a car or bought a car or whatever, you know, that money went in the checking account, and then I went and bought another one, whatever. I mean, I could justify it all. I cleared it all up and didn't have to pay anything.
Right.
But you got to wonder how all these politicians, you know what they make.
Yeah.
Where'd all this money come from?
Yeah. It is funny to see these guys go in to office.
Yeah.
You know, Obama's a great example, you know.
Sure. Clinton.
Yeah.
It's even, you know, the Bushes had oil interests,
True.
you know, way back.
What do you think of George W.? Or what's your hindsight opinion of him now?
My hindsight opinion is not as good as it was.
Sure.
You know, when he was there, I thought he was a good speaker. He did what he needed to do after 9/11 and all that kind of stuff. Whether we needed to go in to Iraq later, you know, I mean, the first Gulf War, you know, I mean, they invaded Kuwait, and it's like, we all our oil interests were in Kuwait. We had a lot of people with a lot of money that had enough power to say, yeah, we can't let this happen. And so I felt pretty good about that one. The second one, I don't know that Hussein was that big of a threat.
Yeah.
You know, especially in hindsight.
Yeah.
So.
Do you think, as some of the conspiracy theories say, do you think we knew about 9/11 before it happened, our government?
Once again, it's one of those things you just hate to think.
I know. As much as you don't want to.
I mean, I believe in good and evil. I know there's a lot of evil out there, and I know, but I hate to think that W knew while he was sitting in that grade school, you know, he was in a grade school room when it happened, and some of the conspiracy theorists have said, they told him, okay, well, I'm busy here, you know, and then he said, I got to go, you know, and like he knew what was going on, kind of. And I just truly, my dad always believed that FDR knew that Pearl Harbor was going to get bombed. Yeah. And there's evidence that the radar guy called for bogeys. We got bogeys coming in, and said, don't worry about it. That's just an exercise going on out there, and he disregarded it. And we didn't scramble our planes. It was their plan to have it all destroyed. Yeah. I mean, I don't think they wanted the loss of life or anything like that, but it was the end justifies the means kind of a thinking.
Well, I want to talk to you about, while we're on the subject, kind of false flags or knowing beforehand. There's a lot of evidence that suggests that Israel knew that the October 7th attacks were going to happen.
Oh, really?
I don't know.
I hadn't heard that.
One side says that, the other side, you know. Where do you stand on the Israel-Gaza thing? What's your thought on all that?
Well, I hadn't heard that they knew about it or they wanted it to happen. I know. I
don't know that that's true, but there's a lot of people that are pretty credible saying that.
Sure, and I just know it was a terrible the atrocities, not just loss of life and all that, but just the manner in which those.
Did you see in the video?
No, and I'm really kind of glad I didn't.
Well,
I've heard lots
Ben
of people
Shapiro,
describe.
I was driving home, and he said, "You need to watch this." He said, "It's horrendous, but you need to watch it." And I remember thinking, I probably should, just to comprehend it, because as Americans, we just don't really think about or care about the plight of other nations. You were talking about countries that didn't have internet earlier, that's still, and maybe they're better off, because there's actually a recent case study where some, primitive civilization got Starlink, and the men got addicted to porn immediately. Oh yeah, right, and TikTok, and their whole society started.
The age-old good versus evil. I mean, there's good and evil. And when I was a kid, it was television. It's going to rot your brain. You watch all this stuff on it.
Kind of did.
And it did.
It was
there was truth to it. There's a lot of stuff on there that.
What kind of TV would you have had when you were 10 years old? Black and white.
Black and white. Had to turn the antenna.
Small box antenna.
Yeah. It was. Get one brother out there turning it, and you'd be wait, no, back up just a little bit. That's good right there. And
not a lot of options either. You didn't have 600 cooking channels to choose from.
No. There was a unity involved in that, though, among people growing up and everything. Is that most everybody watched the Wonderful World of Disney and Red Skelton and all these shows. So when you got to school the next morning,
you were all talking about the
we
same
could all talk
things.
about the same thing. We could all unify on all this stuff, and
you have a shared American culture.
Now everybody's watching something different.
Yeah,
and it's there's not that much.
I've talked about this before. I think you're spot on. There used to be a cultural identity, what it was to be an American. When even up until probably at least the 2000s.
Yeah.
Everybody was watching either Seinfeld or Friends, or they were, you had a few options, but that was it. And now there's thousands of channels, and then you've got the internet.
You got the internet. You can stream anything you want, anytime you want.
Yeah.
Past, present.
Right. I no longer watch any big box media or legacy media. Like anybody that has advertisers that are controlling your content, I don't want to listen to. So I'm exclusively on the podcast now, and just. So some of them are pretty small guys that are just very. They spend a lot of time on their sources and their documentation. They'll put those sources and documents in the comments. I can go look at their sources. I can do my research, and I think they're small enough to not be controlled yet. And so I trust them. Yeah. And it's somebody wearing a T-shirt and jeans that's talking to me the way I speak. It's not somebody in a suit reading off a teleprompter. And it's more relatable. Yeah. I don't know if you're familiar with Tim Pool.
No.
You heard the name?
No.
He's a big political YouTuber who was on the left and was working in the media at the time, and they would have him rewrite stories that he would turn in to put a negative slant on Trump. It was during the 2016 campaign, and they would rewrite his stories to put a negative slant on it. He said, "Why are you doing this? That's not what I wrote, or this isn't even factual. You're asking me to change things." And he started asking questions, and now he's. I wouldn't call him necessarily on the right, but he's a Trump supporter. And I don't even think you necessarily have to be on the right to support Trump.
Well, once again, regardless who it comes from, and right now, as far as I can see, the only option is Trump. I mean,
no matter how you break it down.
Yeah, there's not another option that's going to break
away from.
We had
4 years of Trump.
Yeah.
And we have now had almost 4 years of Biden.
You've got business as usual.
Right.
The swamp. I mean, Washington, D.C. is 93, 94% Democratic, or, Democrat people. And, the only Republicans there are the ones that got sent there from other states, I guess. So,
what do you think the odds are that we're in World War III in the next year or two?
I think part of it depends on this election. And everybody, ever since Trump announced he was going to run, they were always accusing him of being the guy that was going to start the wars.
I remember that.
And
I was afraid of that in 2016. I was like, this guy's kind of a wild card.
He's a
I
live
didn't vote
wire.
in that election. I don't know if I've told you this. I was like, Trump's a reality TV big shot New Yorker. Of course, I'm not going to vote for Hillary, but Trump was just a wild card. I didn't know what he could do.
Yeah.
But then as I started paying attention
Yeah.
to what he did
Yeah.
in office and all, the way they went after him really is what
Yeah.
sold me.
That's
Like,
exactly.
if your government's
I've-
going after you like this, then
I've-
there's something they're hiding.
I've said that many times. When everybody that I disrespect is hating on this man, it makes
Yes.
me think that,
Right. There's something
and
going
they're not just hating on him; they're trying to eliminate him. You know, it's kind of surprised me that he hasn't, been an assassination target or something like that.
Well, there's a lot of talk. I don't know if you're familiar with Alex Jones.
Mhm.
I mean, he's fully believes that Trump will be assassinated before the election. I mean, it's Alex Jones. He's right a lot, but he also is on air a lot, so he's got to talk a lot.
Well, some of it, I mean, that's speculation, regardless however you break it down.
No
It's
matter what.
speculation.
Yeah, 100%.
And it's.
Do you think whoever they are, would do that, or do you think that makes him a martyr?
Well, that's exactly what I was
Or
going
do
to say.
they want him to become a martyr so they can rile up a civil?
I don't
I
know.
kind of feel like January 6th they were trying to push
Mhm.
Trump supporters into violence, which, according to the footage that was released,
I've
the
had
Tucker
that.
release.
I've had that argument with a lot of people on January 6th. I mean, why would Trump want that to happen? Why would Trump?
He has
he
no
didn't.
motivation for that.
There's absolutely no reason that Trump would want
No,
that to happen. It made
zero.
all Republicans look bad. And
unless
if you
his
listen,
ego, I've heard the argument his ego was so big, he wanted to know people were willing to fight for him. Okay, maybe, but he knows they're not going to take over the government with an unarmed insurrection.
right.
There was no threat of
Only person killed was killed for
Ashley
trespassing.
Babbitt.
Yeah, killed for trespassing.
Yeah.
And
Well,
because
that's
she
another
wouldn't,
narrative.
she wouldn't, she
That's-
wouldn't respond to his commands.
But do you remember how January 6th was every day of our lives, and how evil the J6ers were until Tucker released the footage,
Of
and
Chris
then people
Baker,
could see
of
the actual
well,
what happened. You had officers throwing smoke grenades down into the audience, and then one throws it back, and then from there on. But it was instigated.
Tucker also had an interview with Capitol Police Chief Baker,
Yeah.
and he was real clear that I wanted the National Guard there.
Yes.
But
they requested-
Pelosi and Schumer
said
were the
no.
only two that had the authority to call in, and I called and begged them. We need help down here. And they said no.
Yeah.
Said no.
Well, Trump offered it.
Yeah,
They
Trump
declined
offered it before they.
Yes.
Yeah, they declined it before. But even when it
was a
first
setup.
broke out,
It was a setup.
it was
100%. It was
yeah.
a setup.
Never let a good crisis go to waste.
But what's wild is I was talking to a buddy of mine the other day about, I got into politics about 7 years ago. It was around COVID when just nothing was really making sense. My entertainment was infected with just destroying the patriarchy and tearing down, the heroes of the past for, just a different set of values. And it was all very overwhelming. And the more you dug in, it's taken me years to really get to certain facts and certain truths. And if you talk to somebody who's not really that plugged in, you sound like a crazy person.
Well, even
A conspiracy theorist.
yeah.
So how do you go about talking to somebody who's coming in, you're 7 seasons into a show, and they say, what's going on here? How do you summarize or connect with a person that's trying to learn, but there's just so much information?
Yeah.
How do you connect?
I don't know.
Because it's tough. I've struggled with being able to, you'll bring up one thing, I've never heard of that. Okay, well, you try another tag. Well, I've never heard of that.
Yeah.
So it's like any facts you drop that they're unaware of, and that's part of that lie by omission that a lot of the media does, is just not presenting both sides.
Right. That's why one of Chris Plant's says it all the time, that the most insidious power that the media has is the power to ignore.
Yeah, that's a
and
good
they
point.
just ignore all
Media's
this over here.
always been that way. I mean, going back to the pamphlet days, they were trying to.
Well,
I've asked a lot of people of my grandpa's generation and your generation, is it worse now than ever before? And most people say yes, it is. But I wonder, well, what is your?
I think that the media is worse now than it was. At least when I was a kid, they would at least it seemed like they cared. If now it seems like they lie to you, and they know, it's like there was a Soviet woman one time said, in the Soviet Union they lie to us, and we know they're lying to us, and they know we know they're lying to us, and they continue to lie to us.
Right.
And that's just the way it is, and everybody knows it.
Yeah.
And when I was a kid, it wasn't that way so much. We didn't know they were lying to us then, and they tried to keep it that way.
Oh yeah.
They tried to maintain credibility.
Right.
When they're reporting on Vietnam, I'm sure they were leaving out a lot of stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
They didn't tell us about a bridge getting blown up and Lady Bird Johnson's construction crew going in and rebuilding it for $20 million, and all the money that was being kicked into Exxon for fuel, and all they didn't report stuff that made the government look bad or the war effort look bad.
Yeah.
But they did, they tell us what was happening, how many people were killed, all that kind of stuff. But they tried to maintain credibility, I think, during the Walter Cronkite era.
Yeah.
And now, I don't think Jake Tapper or any of those guys, I can't believe that they believe some of the stuff they're saying.
But man, they seem to.
Well,
they seem to be completely.
It was
and,
on.
And
it
both
was on.
sides say this about the other. The right calls the left to cult. The left calls the right calls of Trump. And and I can criticize Trump. I'm sure you can too.
Sure.
There's plenty of things I can criticize him about. I don't think he's a perfect individual by any means. I just think for what's going on right now, things need to be shaken up in a big way. And if even if he's just a bull in a china shop, I'll take that over anything else right now.
That would be better to do it through him going in there and draining the swamp however it takes, as opposed to another revolution. And you look at our in the French Revolution is like let them eat cake. We're suffering out here, and you don't seem to care. And the American Revolution was fought over just a lot less than what we're doing right now.
Could you imagine if they all had to mask up and stay inside for 2 weeks?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Or just pay the taxes that we pay now. The taxes we pay now are just, and that's what our Constitution was written about. I mean, that's something that every American, it should be in every school system. You teach the Declaration of Independence. I mean, the Declaration of Independence was the list of grievances that they had with the king. They listed them all out. And then the Constitution addressed how are we going to stop that from happening in our government.
Yeah.
The king did this. So what we're going to do is do this, and that's going to prevent. I mean, it was all about keeping our government small, keeping government from overreaching its power.
Yeah.
And government overreach, all this stuff that's getting done by executive order now, it's insane.
Including Trump.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's insane. I mean, neither side.
Yeah.
The president should be there to
that's
sign
one of my big
bills.
gripes against Trump is the executive
Exactly.
orders that he did. But Obama set a precedent before that. Bush, I mean, it's been insane for most of my lifetime.
Whether you like the executive order or not, it should have come from Congress. And it should have been a bill and been paid.
Well, that's my point on the DOJ going after Trump. There's a lot of people on the left celebrating, saying, "No, we got him on 34 felonies." I'm like, wait till it's your guy.
Oh yeah.
Like, I understand that you don't like this person, but just people don't really have the ability to flip the mirror and say, "What if this were reversed?"
Yeah.
And I try and do that with every situation.
Yeah, it's.
What if it's your guy? You would be crying bloody. This is,
Yeah. No, nobody wants to. Nobody wants to hurt. Nobody wants to, to feel that what it would be like, and it's. I don't know. Kind of.
Well, we were talking about World War III earlier. You've got China doing drills all around Taiwan.
Mm-hmm.
You got Russia, Ukraine. You've got what's going on in the Middle East. There's as much unrest as as I've seen, really, with Gaza, Israel, the public opinion's turning against Israel, largely, and here we are in a cultural civil war at the very least over here.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't take anything for this to get hot. World War II didn't start with the first shot. The stage was set. The chessboard was.
Yeah.
I feel like the chessboard is set to go right now.
Well, and I heard a deal one time, and I'm not sure how accurate it was, that when World War I started, the kings that were involved in all this kind of stuff, they already had the maps drawn up, what it was going to look like after the war.
War games.
They knew.
Yeah.
We're going to do a little population control or however you want to do it, but they knew, this is going to happen, and I don't know, like say, for the powers that be, for the super rich, if you will, that are actually calling the shots and making all these things happen, when it becomes beneficial for them. I've said that about the stock market many times. When it becomes beneficial for them to crash it all down and recollect everybody's stuff, which is what'll happen. They're holding the mortgage on everybody's house. Eventually, it'll trickle back up to them. When it becomes, strategically advantageous for them, then they can pull a card or two here and there, just like they did with AIG and all the subprime mortgages and stuff in '08. And I sometimes think they do that too, just to they know how to control the stock market.
Right.
They know how to short sell stuff and cause a few things to happen like that, so that it can all, they sell all their stock, then they cause it all to trickle down, and the process of them selling all of it causes it to crash too.
Right.
And then they got their cash, and they wait for it to bottom out and go back in and reinvest however they want to.
Have you heard the theory that Nixon was removed by the CIA?
It wouldn't surprise me. I
haven't
heard that.
Tucker talked about it when he was on Rogan last time.
I know.
And I've meant to do some research on it, but I haven't yet.
I know what Nixon did was so minor compared to the things that are going on now.
Yeah.
He was the most popular president. He had the highest approval ratings of any president since World War II.
That's what I understand.
I mean, he had a 73 or 4% approval ratings. He got us out of Vietnam, and I think that could have had something to do.
Oh, yeah.
The industrial military complex didn't want to get out of Vietnam yet, and
didn't Eisenhower warn about the industrial?
In his farewell address in 1961, January 61, he's addressing Congress, and he said, beware of the industrial military complex, because they're going to, and probably at that time, Korean War had been going on for a while, and he recognized just the greed, the capitalism. It once again, I mean, capitalism's like anything else. It can be good. It can be used for good. It can be used for evil. If a person gets rewarded for hard work and good thinking, then it's good.
I think it's more than that now, Rick. I feel like the people who are most attracted to power are psychopaths and sociopaths. There's not enough people who say, I'm good enough. I'm happy. I've got everything I've ever wanted. But the people who are driven the most, for every Elon Musk, there's 100,000 psychopaths who just want to control people and make more money, and just to continue forward. And that to me is
the narcissism, if you will,
good and evil kind of thing. It's kind of wild. I've been wanting to do a podcast for a long time, and I just didn't really know how to go about it. Get that mic in front of you so you can.
Okay.
But to go from 0 to 90 in just a month, it's been kind of wild, but it's been fun.
And like anything else, you're gonna learn,
I'm
things
learning a lot.
things that you could have
But
done.
what other opportunity, it's been so neat to me because, like I told you earlier, every time I've gotten to talk to you, it's kind of truncated. It's somebody got to get on stage or you pick
Sure.
up a four-wheeler and you got the kids or something. It's how can you just sit down and have a conversation with people anymore these days? It's almost a lost art.
And two, saving it for posterity.
Yes.
That's something that we didn't have. I don't know anything
No.
about my grandparents.
Well,
nothing.
I've told this story. I wish I'd have done this with my grandpa, and that's kind of what made me start.
Sure.
I remember my conversations, but boy, I'd like to have them on camera. Just one.
Yeah.
Just to see that back and forth.
I agree. I mean, I've got a few still shots. I don't think I have any still shots of my grandparents. Very, very few, if I have any, and not that many of my parents, really. And that's amazing, the technology. When my grandmother did die, I had one grandmother that I knew. She lived to be 92, and so I got to know her a little bit, but it was just once a year going to visit and stuff like that. But she told me a story about one time when she was a little girl living in Mississippi, and they, her and her little brother had to get up before, be ready to go at sunup, and took the cow and put a cart on the cow and took it to town, traded the cow for supplies, and her and her brother pulled it back, back home with sugar and flour and all this stuff, and that was a full day. They had to really hustle to get home before dark. And you think how many people, if you had to go back 100 years ago, could even survive in those times?
Well, not that long ago, people were working to live, and now we're working to buy useless shit we don't need. It's a big difference just within a couple of generations.
Yeah, our values.
Of all of humankind, just in the last couple of generations.
Oh, yeah. Our values have changed a lot. It used to be, like I say, it was very important to have food, clothing, and shelter. If you got food, clothing, and shelter, you're wealthy. You got everything you need.
Yes.
And a lot of people that didn't. And now, like you say, we're looking for all manner of foolish ways to.
Now we're very picky about our food. We're very picky about our clothing, and very picky about our shelter.
Yeah. It's a different culture that we live in. It certainly is.
It is, and you've got a granddaughter.
Yeah, we've got a granddaughter and a grandson, and
so that the world they're growing up in, and they're how old roughly?
10 granddaughters.
So about
10.
the age of my middle one. Yeah, so
10 and 5.
around the same age. Very different than when I grew up. I can't imagine being a grandparent. I mean,
and they can already figure out things, technology-wise. They can already figure out things on the phone and streaming TV and stuff like that.
Yeah. My middle one teaches me things I can do on my phone. Just hit this button twice and it does. How'd you figure that out?
Yeah. Everybody knows that.
I think I'm just done learning. Like I'm just technology. I don't know, about 2005 was about. I was good.
Yeah.
I
didn't want it. I resisted it. Computers first started coming out. I was 24, 25 years old. I mean, I could have embraced it and done a lot better, but I was like, nah, I'll just use pencil and paper. I'll be fine,
Yeah.
And then probably I was 35 when I first had to use one. I had a job where I had to place orders on the computer. Yeah. And then that was just basic. I think that's what they called it, was basic programming. And now I'm using one every day for looking up stuff, and I wish that I had learned a keyboard. And I don't know how to keyboard anything. I just
can't type.
No.
Yeah. Well, when I was growing up, they were teaching in school by my generation. By the time I hit 7th grade, I might have been the first class to have it, actually.
Yeah.
But it was such a ubiquitous thing. Keyboards this would have been the mid '90s.
Yeah.
It was just a lot of houses had them by then.
Yeah. And in the 70s, it was, women were learning to use it, or girls in school were learning to type, because you might be a secretary, and
isn't that interesting? But
guys, we're never going to need to type. my dad had to learn to type. He was a linotype operator at the newspaper, and the keyboard was vertical instead of horizontal, and he knew how to type on that machine.
Really?
It was hot metal poured into molds, and he'd said all this stuff. I don't really understand a lot of it, but when he was 58 or so, he was wanting to make it to 62 and retire, and they changed from, they did away with his machine, and he had to learn to type. And I can remember him saying, they're not going to keep me on up there. They're going to hire some, girl out of high school that can type a lot faster than I can, but they did.
I'm starting to feel that way too. Like, I've been in corporate for almost 20 years. It's like, what do I provide that somebody,
sure,
half my age and
yeah,
twice as smart at what's going on now can't do.
Yeah. I'm that way in my line of work. I know older motorcycles a lot better than I do the new ones.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're, I know how to work on carburetors a lot better than I do fuel injection. I'm learning the fuel injection a little bit more and more, as just like learning how to use my phone or my computer. But it's not, I know carburetors pretty well.
Right.
And then it comes to something else. It's I have to actually give it some thought.
But what's funny to me is the things people are gifted in. I think I was talking to you when I picked up my four-wheeler from you that I don't have that gift that you and Dad have that can understand mechanics, and I don't know if that's a lack of interest or or your brain.
Sometimes
my youngest one seems to get that stuff just naturally and is curious about it. But I can write a song easily.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
And
we
that
all
might
have
not
our
be something
gifts.
You can do.
We all have our gifts. There's no doubt.
It's just, do you think that's you think that those kind of gifts come naturally from DNA, or is it something that you're just so interested in that you make yourself good at it?
Probably a combination of both.
Maybe,
I'm a spiritual guy. I believe that we're spirit beings in a flesh body. And who knows? God told Jeremiah, "Before I placed you in your mother's womb, I knew you." And so that spirit has already lived. Your spirit, I believe, already lived, and God knew you.
I believe that too.
Before He placed you in your mother's womb with your parents, with your DNA.
Yeah.
I believe He knows what He's doing. And so...
Do you believe in reincarnation? Do you believe that we continue to come back?
I don't know that we ever really, I don't believe that our spirit actually ever dies.
Well, I don't either. But do you believe we just go, I don't necessarily believe we go to a heaven and just live joyously for eternity. I think we might have to keep coming back for lessons, maybe if we get it right.
Perhaps. I don't know that it's a great big universe out there.
Yeah.
We could go to a totally different, different planet, different solar system. Who knows?
You think Elon Musk will get us on Mars?
It takes a long time to get there, I think.
It does.
I don't know. That was something I laughed about with people talking about global warming, and we're going to have to populate Mars, and you're worried about the Earth's temperature going up a degree or two, and Mars is pretty harsh.
It is.
Pretty harsh environment. But I don't know about colonizing. It seems impractical to do that.
Well, he's also talking about service robots. So like a C-3PO.
Sure.
Where you'd have a robot in your house, and they can make them at Tesla for $10,000, sell them for $20,000, which is relatively affordable by today's standards. And so the robot ratio to human beings could be at least 1-to-1 in the next 10 years.
Yeah.
Have it do tasks, simple things, even complex things. If it's an AI operating, you could have AI servants. But then, you knew my grandma Marilyn. She had a deep love of science fiction.
Oh yeah.
That she passed on to me, and I read a lot of science fiction from her era, the 50s and 60s. And they talk about these things. Dune is all about how...
Yeah, I need to see that.
The precursor to the Dune movies is that humans completely gave all responsibility to AI computer beings, basically. And they realized that we're just serving the humans. For what?
you talked about World War III earlier too, and you talk about AI robots and stuff like that. If who knows how many of those type robots could be stockpiled somewhere by someone,
Well,
that
here's something else that doesn't make sense to me. They're talking about reinstituting the draft. Why do we need bodies anymore?
Well,
We got AI flying planes. We got. Why do you need bodies?
And see, that's always, if I'm not mistaken, it's like drones and a lot of that kind of stuff is like been against the Geneva Convention or something like that, where you're not supposed to use machines to do this kind of stuff. But I can't help but think that that's going to be a broken rule. And
people always refer back to stuff like the Geneva Convention. There are no rules in war.
No.
You do whatever you have to do to win. You worry about the consequences later, and if you win, then you write the rules.
Right.
For
Winners
what the
write
other
the
side
rules.
did.
Yeah.
Even if you did it.
No such thing as a fair fight.
No.
It's,
There's a good. You remember Norm Macdonald?
Mm-hmm.
He had a great
Okay.
Saturday Night Live.
Yeah. I know a different Norm Macdonald. That's why I said yes so quick. And I was
he
like,
used to do Weekend Update on SNL, but he had a great joke that he said, I was looking back in history, and the good guys win every war.
well, yeah, they wrote the history.
Yeah, you write the history when you win.
And you like to believe that that's the case. You like to believe that Hitler was, this evil, and they did. Hirohito did attack us first, at Pearl Harbor and stuff like that. And who knows, if Hitler had gotten jet engines 6 months earlier, or if he had developed the nuke, before we did. They were working on it. It was all a mad scramble for the technology of the time.
Well, this brings me to, did you see Oppenheimer? Are you familiar with the film?
I did, and had a hard time following it.
Really?
The new Oppenheimer.
Yeah.
I saw Fat Man and Little Boy and really enjoyed that movie.
Yeah.
Oppenheimer, I don't know whether it's just the mood I was in or what, but I had a hard time struggling to keep up with what they were.
It's long too.
Yeah, and it bounced back and forth from different stuff. And that's
three timelines going on.
Yeah.
You had the past, present, and I think some future stuff. But if you look at what we did in World War II, well, the atomic bomb's a great example. Tucker went on Joe Rogan and made the comment that if you support dropping nuclear weapons on a country and killing innocent civilians, especially when they were trying to surrender, that's not a defensible position. He called it evil, and then there were a lot of people on the right that said, no, if you think what we did was wrong, then you're evil. And so there's this whole argument right now amongst the right of whether it was a good thing or a bad thing to drop nuclear weapons. What is your take on that?
It ended the war.
It did decisively.
That was my biggest deal. I can remember Dad talking about it. He was in the Pacific, and he would never ever talk about the war. I asked him questions, and he'd always answer yes or no or whatever.
Right.
Never ever tell me any details about what he'd been through or anything like that. But he did say that yes, there were 300,000 people killed at Hiroshima or Nagasaki or whatever. How many Americans would have died if we'd had to land on the beaches in Japan?
Well, I think the question more comes from there's a train of thought that Japan was done. They were ready to surrender already, and we just dropped it to say, listen, this is what we have.
Yeah.
Let's not do this again.
And one thing, as bad as nuclear weapons are, the fact that we have them has prevented another world war, because leaders on both sides, I think, are naturally, they don't want to be that guy.
I think it has, but I also, if you look back in history, every 80 years there seems to be some big global conflict or violent conflict.
Even more frequently than that. Before that, World War I ended in 1918. 21 years later, we were in World War II.
Yeah, no. That's
so,
true.
and people blame the Treaty of Versailles and all that kind of stuff. They put such,
Wasn't a great treaty. I don't think, if you
haven't studied it that much, but they said it put such harsh restrictions on the German people
yes,
that they couldn't.
Yeah. Well, that's
they couldn't deal with
part
it.
of what Hitler
Yeah.
used to gain power. But I think if you look back at Greece and Rome and some of these civilizations, the things they were facing and talking about reminds me of where America is right now. I feel like we're in what's the term for it? End time, not end times, but the fall of a power.
Every great civilization has fallen.
Yeah, and
so far
we're very young compared to Rome or Greece.
Yeah, and eventually, that's it's got to happen sooner or later. I don't know. I've heard a lot of different sayings about why civilizations fall and stuff like that. Heard a sermon one time. A guy was talking about birth rates falling. When rising a society that's increasing and getting bigger and better all the time, birth rates are high. My parents. I was one of 5 kids, and Dad was one of 7, and Mom was one of 6, and it seemed like families were bigger and bigger and bigger, through the years, and birth rates have definitely fallen. I mean, the average family is.
I know a lot of people my age who don't have kids at all.
Yeah, don't want them.
And don't.
Why do I want that?
Yeah.
I don't understand it because I think that, kids are the greatest joy, that anybody can have. It's such a gift, and to just turn that gift away, just because you don't want to deal with the responsibility, and we can justify anything that we want to justify. I mean, some people say, well, I don't want to bring kids into a world this bad and all this kind of stuff. But
the saddest thing are people who want to have kids and can't find the right person. That's something I have a deep sympathy for. There's a lot of good people I know that want to find that
would
person,
like
and, but don't even have the opportunity to try. And then I've known people who have tried for a long time and couldn't make it happen, and found out one of them couldn't have kids, and I feel so blessed to have 3 healthy boys that I'm always worried, when's something going to be taken from me? Like, I don't deserve.
You can't go through life scared.
No, that's absolutely true.
It's the old serenity prayer. You worry about things that you can control, and
my grandma. Did you know my grandma Durham? Past mom?
Yeah. Grandma Mert.
No, not Mert.
Not Mert. That
Catherine.
was okay.
Did you know?
I don't remember her much. I remember Grandma Mert a lot.
Yeah. Do you?
Yeah.
Probably saw her more often.
Yeah. She lived right down there on South Mock Street.
Yep.
We'd go down there and
Kimball lived there for a while when he was building his house.
Okay.
That's actually where he was living.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, she was she's a
wild lady.
Wow, yeah, she was very entertaining.
I went through all the pictures after Grandpa died and found a picture of Grandma Mert reading a Penthouse magazine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Go straight to the Chester the Molester on the back.
That was so I don't know what year Grandma Munchkin would have been born, or Grandma Marilyn, 40, somewhere in 40. But she was adopted by Mert. And
I didn't know that.
No, that
never knew that.
Her actual parents. They adopted her. But they were that was a good time growing up back in the 80s and 90s out in Farmington, Prairie Grove.
Oh yeah.
What a great place to grow up.
I can't think of any better. I mean, my parents, I don't know for certain, but they moved from Alabama in 1962 to Prairie Grove, and bought that land out there. It was in the middle of nowhere at the time. It was out, south of Prairie Grove, up on a hill, and but I don't consider myself to have any kind of racial, worries at all, but I can see where my father, growing up in George Wallace's Alabama in 1962, which he was a Wallace supporter, but I can see where he said, well, we moved to some place that doesn't have all this racial tension. I don't think it's that he didn't like black people or anything like that. He just didn't want to be around, because in 62, that was the year that the National Guard had to come down because they were letting black people in the University of Alabama. I mean, Wallace said it'd be over his dead body, and they said, no, we're going to move you. We're not going to kill you, but we're going to move you out of the way. And he was one of those guys that stood up and said what he felt too. But he was a little more.
It's interesting how many people I know whose parents moved them. Somebody at some point immigrated over here, but then like my wife's parents were in California, and in the late '80s, my father-in-law said, "This is enough. Of this. We're getting out of here." But just because like you said, your parents moved up here. You haven't been here for generations in the state. No, but how many options do we have in America? What a great place to be, where you got 50 states where you can say, hey, I can go somewhere and speak the same language, and
that's another thing that's interesting to me is the differences in the different cultures around the United States. How much different they used to be before television and the internet and everything like that. I mean, it used to be somebody came in from Madison County, you knew
exactly what county they were from.
Oh yeah, they're not from Washington County, they're from Madison County. Wow. I mean, they spoke a different language. It was the same language, but they used words that
they used, slang
but
and drawl.
But it was different. And now Southern, my family, when I'd go to Alabama, I'd come back and be saying, oh yeah, we're going down, and stuff like that. And it'd take me a while to kind of quit doing that.
Yeah, you adapt.
Yeah, but that's something I kind of miss, the different cultures, the Cajun culture in Louisiana and the Deep South, and then up north they got the New York culture that everybody hates Trump for.
And then you got the Midwest, you got the North. So many, and I've been in very few of them. I'm not a big traveler. You've been around a lot?
I was lucky enough. I did, if you call it lucky, I was doing pipeline construction for about 5 years. And I wasn't just traveling through or anything. I actually worked for 2-3 months with the Navajo Indians out there, in Arizona, going across. And then went to California for about 6 months, living in Napa, California, and then different places. I'd spend 2, 3, 4 weeks here and there, and you see the work ethic differences and the attitude differences from one part of the country to the other.
Really?
You get down south, and you got to just kind of downshift a gear or two, and just kind of slow down. Nobody gets in a hurry. Working union jobs, some of them, versus the non-union jobs. That's the only union job I ever did. Was I had to join the union to be on some of the jobs I was on, and that's where you learn. You don't just ask somebody to help you. I asked a guy to help me do something one time, and I work for that guy over there. When he tells me to do it, I'll do it. And I'm like, okay. And I just walked over and told that guy what I needed, and then he came over and asked, and it all worked out.
Right.
And he wasn't mean about it, but he just wanted to let me know that ain't the way it works around here.
Wow.
So I just thought we were all working for the same company, but I guess not.
It's a naive attitude, though.
Yeah,
right.
I was only about 30. I did that from 30 to 35 or so, and then I settle down back here.
So how'd you get, you and Dad both have a lot of experience with engines and mechanics. When did you start doing that kind of stuff?
Well, I was foolish, and I ran my bike low on oil and seized the piston.
Really?
It was...
How old were you?
14.
Okay.
You know, didn't check my oil often enough. Ran it low. I was on the way to work. It seized and it broke loose, and I rode it on to work. But my boy was rattling. And
Where were you working at 14?
I wasn't working at 14. That's why I had to take it apart and fix it. A piston, I remember in those days, a piston was like $8, and a set of rings was $5.
Yeah. What are they now?
Oh, 10 times that anyway.
Okay.
You know.
Yeah.
So probably more. But yeah, it was one of those things. That's how I got started, and it was just necessity. If I wanted to fix my bike,
Yeah.
I had the tools in my toolkit.
Yeah.
I had the tools in my toolkit, and we took it apart and figured it out. Didn't have manuals, and just figured it out. I mean, that particular time, I put it back together, and I had no idea how to time a camshaft. And I got extremely lucky. I put it back together out of time and kicked and kicked and kicked. It wouldn't start. And, you know, there's probably an 80% chance you're going to bend a valve when you put it back together out of time. But I got lucky, and I'm just laying in bed one night, and it's like, you know, that camshaft probably should, I mean, the valves need to open when the piston's coming down, and then it just clicked. And I called the shop the next day and says, what are the marks on these things, you know? And he told me where the marks were, and I put the marks up, and it fired right up, and got real lucky that didn't bend a valve or something before.
But to know about valves and like, how did you learn that kind of terminology? Like, how did you know how all that stuff worked?
Oh, it was just a matter of taking it apart and looking at it more than anything. Like I say, we had a lot more time back then than we had money.
And a lot less distractions.
And yeah, we didn't have Facebook or anything like that to waste my time on. So it was just a matter of, you know, I mean, I look back at how ignorant I was. You know, even after I went to a mechanic school and came back, I mean, it's a never-ending learning process. I still learn stuff all the time. Once again, learning fuel injection now is it's a totally different animal than a carburetor, and I'm not real good with a laptop, and I don't know the software and stuff to use. I don't even know that it's available. You have to be at a dealership to use their software. It kind of aggravates me, in all honesty, that they build machines like my pickup. If you want to replace I've got a analog brake sensor that's bad, and they say, well, you can replace it, but then you're going to have to come back here and get it activated or whatever, you know, by their computer. And, you know, that kind of stuff it's almost a monopoly type situation where they shouldn't have the ability to monopolize something like that. I mean, if you're going to sell something, it ought to be something that they can sell you the stuff to work on it. And
well, they're saying in a lot of these cars now, especially electric cars, but all cars eventually will have a shut-off feature. Whoever orders the car shut down can just shut it down remotely.
They've another conspiracy theory that ever since cars have had electronic ignitions, that they've had that option, that they could flip a switch and shut everything down if they wanted to. Whoever they is.
Whoever they are.
Yeah.
Who are they?
Yeah.
You know? I mean, if we've talked about bankers and investors and deep state, all that.
It's the golden rule, you know. I really think it comes back to money. You know, those that have the most money have the most power, the most control over.
Do they meet in a secret room somewhere in a cave?
Yeah.
Like, where does this?
Yeah.
It's so inconceivable to people like us, like who's controlling the world, but somebody's doing it.
Oh, sure. I mean,
and they're not much smarter than us. You know.
It's not about being smart. I think I watched John Wayne's last film was The Shootist with Ronnie Howard, and Ronnie was asking him what it took to be the fastest gun in the West, and he said, well, it's not about being the fastest sometimes, it's about being willing. And sometimes with these world leaders, just like what we were talking about, the conspiracy on 9/11 and all this other stuff, or are you willing to do that? And if you're willing to make that call, that'd be hard. It's hard to believe that people can. Hard to believe FDR could sit there and allow Pearl Harbor to be bombed just to get us into World War II, or allow 9/11 to happen just to fire up the industrial military complex and
But that
make
certainly
millions
happened.
of dollars.
That certainly happened.
Yeah.
So there's an easy motivation there,
Mm-hmm.
if you want to point it out.
Yeah. And why it's so taboo to ask those questions, I don't know. I don't really have an opinion on whether 9/11 was engineered or what, but when you watch those buildings fall like that,
It begs the question.
It makes you think. It makes you
really
beg that
does.
question. That looked like that was a demo deal, like it was.
Really
it could be
does.
planned.
Yeah.
And once again, I hate to think
Yeah.
that kind of evil exists, especially within our government.
Yeah.
You know it exists, but when they're doing it to us, all the while telling us how good they are for us.
Did you ever watch the show 24? Did you ever hear?
Yeah.
Did you watch
Yeah.
it?
Oh yeah.
I remember thinking, that was from like 2000 to 2010, somewhere in there, and I remember thinking, oh yeah, that's nuts that these,
Mm-hmm.
things,
Oh,
backdoor channels,
Yeah.
even within the government, these conflicting. I thought that was all fiction, and now that's probably just a very basic version of what really happens. You've got factions within factions in Washington, and these people that get elected or compromised, and it's just a swamp is a good way to put it.
Oh, it's
Like I just don't know how anybody,
how.
not Trump, not anybody, can really fix it.
Well, once again, I think the only way you fix it this time, if he does get elected and he does want to do it, he's gonna have to eliminate some people. And people in high places.
We're in such a scary time with cyber attacks. I mean, everything's online now.
Mm-hmm.
So all your electric grids and power grids, and if you had the right Russian hacker or Chinese hacker, shutting down power grids over here. So I mean, we need intelligence.
Sure.
Desperately. We were talking about this earlier. Like, maybe you root out the head of it, but what's to say in 4 or 5 years when another president comes in and his focus is on something else, that the corruption, evil's going to spread anywhere it can. It's just a constant.
Yeah. And that's where I get back to the executive orders. Those executive orders should not be,
a king's decree.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's a king's decree. The Congress is supposed to be the most powerful. It's a myth that we have 3 equal branches of government.
Yes.
The legislative, the executive, and the judicial. And Congress has always been supposed to be the most powerful
'cause it's
of all of
represented by
them. They can impeach the president. They can impeach judges if they want to. Judges are only there as long as they're behaving,
Right.
and then they can be eliminated.
Yeah.
Don't know that it happens very often, but.
Certainly don't hear about it.
But what I'm getting at is it shouldn't be one man that says that throws 100 executive orders out there, and the next guy gets elected, and everything gets reversed. We go back to where we were.
Yeah.
And it's like Biden this year with the border. His first day in office, he changed.
He rescinded all of Trump's
rescinded.
Remain in Mexico policies
Right,
and all that
right.
stuff. Yeah.
And then said he couldn't do anything about it without Congress doing it. And then a few days later, he passes another executive order, which really didn't do much. I mean, it limited to like 5,000 a day coming in.
I think it was 2,500.
Yeah.
But still, it's a ridiculous number. Yeah.
And
it's an unsustainable number. And we were talking about American culture earlier.
Yeah.
And it's not only, it's always been we're a country of immigrants.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And that's great, but there's a right and a wrong way to go about it. And it just makes you wonder, what is the purpose of just wide opening, like just opening the gates? They're breaking federal laws doing this.
Mm-hmm.
what do you think the ultimate goal is? And I believe in immigration. I think immigration is a fantastic thing. But I know a lot of legal immigrants who are upset about this. That said, I had to go through all these hoops
Sure.
and all these things to do this, and now they're just
In the last 3 years, there have been more people illegally cross our southern border than what came through Ellis Island in the first 50 years.
get out of here. Is
That
that
it was
real?
there. Yeah.
Wow.
That came through 50
Yeah,
years.
the
People came
hub.
through and processed their papers and went,
Is
you
that
know, from
right?
Europe.
That's insane.
And that's been just since Biden, since Biden took office.
Same-
Freudian slip
Same
there.
thing.
But you were talking about the power grids earlier, and cyber attacks.
Yeah.
Well, the southern border, to me, you got to ask the question: how many boots on the ground attacks could be organized through a dozen people in each state, blow up a substation, you know? They could put a world of hurt to our infrastructure.
Well, even if you say, I don't know what the number is now. What's a conservative estimate? 15 million?
In the last,
Conservative of people flooding
Yeah.
the border. Even if 1% are coming over here to do ill intent
Sure.
to this country,
sure.
that's a lot of terrorist people, and there's a lot of military-age men from China coming over, which
That-
is pretty wild.
Yeah,
Why?
I heard a deal there in San Diego, of all places, crossing the Mexican border there in San Diego, and they were all Chinese, Afghanistan, you know.
Yeah.
Their countries of origin were just like, why are you coming in through Baja? Because Baja is probably the easiest place to get across the border, in all honesty. I ride motorcycles down there, and
Yeah.
to go to the mainland, you've got to get a permit for your vehicle, and you got a tourist visa and all this kind of stuff. You go in at Mexicali, you just ride across the border. It's just like going into Oklahoma.
Right.
It's just, I can ride across there and just ride right back. And I don't know. That's,
How many times you been to Mexico?
countless times.
You
I
get
started
pretty regular.
First time I went, I was working. I went down to Monterey to work for a couple of weeks at a pipe plant down there. We were just building a plant, and then I went back in '97 to ride across the border. This is
Keep talking.
before 9/11, and you could just ride across without any kind of a passport or anything like that. You could go, before 9/11, you could go to Mexico without a passport at all. And we'd go over there and just ride motorcycles in the desert and come back and eat, drink, and be merry and ride back to the United States. We'd stay in the United States every night.
Right.
Just the last few years, we started, I've been doing that ever since. I go down about every winter, and we stay on the American side, and we ride across into the Mexican desert, and just ride across the desert. There's very few fences, and it's you just go wherever you want to go. Just navigate by line of sight. But last 3 years, we've taken trips down deep in. We went to Cabo San Lucas 2 years ago, and then last year and the year before, we went to Mazatlan, just riding through the Copper Canyon area,
Right.
and just riding a lot of dirt roads. And
You never
riding
lost
down-
that love of motorcycles.
No,
What is it about that
I
calls to you?
I don't know, and I never was that natural of a rider.
Really?
Your dad was way better rider than I was when
Was
we were
he?
14. Yeah, I mean, he could pull wheelies and stuff, and I just struggled with it. I just,
Really?
but I just loved to ride, and I kept doing it.
Well, he still loves the two wheels,
Yeah. Yeah. No, we rode a lot together between Prairie Grove and Lake Weddington. You know the road. I mean,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
all
Oh, yeah.
twisty road, and we'd just go out there and ride to the lake and
Were
ride
you with
wherever.
him when he broke his arm?
Yes, when he broke his elbow that time.
Mhm.
Yeah, I still remember your mom when I walked in the hospital. Me and Wes walked in. There's two of my favorite people, Rick Owens and Wes Wallace.
Is that what she said?
Yeah. And I just, Pat and Marilyn were sitting there, and then she said it. I knew she still loved me,
Yeah.
but
She wasn't happy about it.
no, she
She's
wasn't
still
happy.
mad about
No,
it.
she's probably. But and that's another thing, Bill. I'd been racing motorcycles. I wasn't double A yet, but I was doing pretty well racing the Blackjack Enduro circuit, and I sell him one of my old bikes, and
Yeah.
we go out and ride, and he's right on my fender chasing me
Yeah.
around and stuff, and he'd probably even admit that might have been why he went down. He's just trying to go too fast, too quick,
Yeah.
and that is one thing I've always tried to be, is pretty careful. I like to go fast, like to push the push the limit, but only so far.
Dad and I were never on the same frequency. We had some common interests, but we're very different people.
Mm-hmm.
And my youngest one, Theo, is on the same whatever frequency Dad is on.
Yeah.
He wants to mess with tools, and he wants to chainsaw stuff and ride bikes, and him and Dad are mountain biking buddies
Yeah.
now. We had some Durham shirts for the first time in like 20,
Yeah.
about 20, like 07.
Yeah.
15 years at least.
Yeah. We got one the other night.
Did you?
Is that one of the new ones? I mean,
Yeah.
those were just.
I was like, go give me a shirt.
Yeah. I should have bought more.
That was a good time.
Yeah, it was. I couldn't believe how good you guys sounded. I mean,
Thank you.
for somebody that you guys don't play together often, do you?
We hadn't, before Durham Fest 1, which
Mhm.
we were at last
Yeah.
September, we hadn't played in 12 years.
Yeah.
So this is the second show
Mm-hmm.
in 12 years, yeah.
Wow.
The first one was rough. We didn't have enough time. It had been a long time, and it was not. I'm gonna get my mic up here.
Mhm.
It was not a fun experience for me. It was stressful. I was hosting it here.
Mhm.
I don't
Yeah,
like
here.
a lot of people.
Sure.
I'm kind of reclusive.
Yeah.
Took that after old granddad. But having it there and not having the stress of people
Mhm.
coming out here and having hosted it and having more time to prepare, it was so much fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's great to have just different family and friends.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you don't really get to spend, you're kind of on stage most of the time, but
Yeah.
it was,
I know we had a good time. I was impressed with the music part of it for sure. It was all.
did you get a chance to watch, you were there early, you saw Emma Mann play,
Mhm.
the girl that played
Yeah.
before us.
Yeah.
I think she's fantastic.
Yeah. She's got a special voice for sure.
I'm trying to get, she's coming out next week. We're going to work up a couple
Mhm.
duets.
Collaborate a little
A
bit.
little collab. Yeah, but I want to get her in front of a drum kit. Like, I feel like she would do well in front of a band,
Mhm. Yeah, she was all just her and her guitar.
But it's so hard to, with just one person and one guitar, it's really hard to cut through. I think she'd be good front of a band.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to make that happen. But she's super talented.
You were talking about different gifts and stuff like that. It's just something. The fact that you wrote your music,
Yeah.
the creative part of it is something that I've never had. I fix things. I fix things.
Right.
I mean, you give me something that's broken, I can put it back and figure, that's supposed to be. I'm a fixer. But as far as creating, it's not something I've ever had any. As far as writing a story or even telling a story to the grandkids, that I just made up off the top of my head.
Right.
I can't do it. It just never has been. Never been in me.
You met my mom's dad, didn't you? Do you know Don?
Don. Mom. Oh yeah. I was trying to think of your grandma's dad, but
Yeah.
no, I know Don Dunaway. Yeah.
Did you ever hear him tell a story?
Probably.
He's a master of the tall
Mhm.
tale. Like
Yeah.
every year,
Yeah.
and growing up with him as my grandpa, every year that story would get better and better.
Mhm.
And so even though you knew he was full of shit,
Yeah.
it was still entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
And I just loved hearing those builds.
Yeah.
I knew a lot of guys like that would just,
Yeah.
tell those stories. And those are That's a lost art.
Oh, yeah. I had an uncle like that, and every time he was getting ready to lie to you, he'd say, now, straight up. Straight up, I'm telling you. And he would
Disclaimer.
Oh, yeah. No, he'd tell you, and you'd be like, no, straight up.
Straight up.
Yeah. And he told us a lot of good ones. He loved kids, and told us a lot of wild stories. But one about the fishing trip, and they had a jug line. They hooked on this thing, and it kept pulling the boat around. So they went and hooked onto the tractor. And he said, and when the water's just right to this day, you can still see that tractor going back and forth in the swamp. And I just, okay, Harold.
When I was in either a sophomore or a junior in high school, my teacher assigned us, we had to speak to the oldest person we knew and do an interview with them. And I don't know if it was part of the assignment, but I recorded it. I had a cassette player, and it was my grandpa Pat's mom, Catherine. But she was 90 something or another when she passed in 2015, I think. But so this would have been in like 98. She'd probably been in her 80s. But just talking to her about growing up in the 20s and 30s and what it was like and what the Great Depression was like, and listening was one of the most fascinating experience. I still have the cassette of her talk, of her voice. I had to type it up into an essay and kind of turn it in, but it was just such a, and I went back and listened to it.
How did she relate to the Depression? Did she really realize? The people that I've talked to about the Depression, they just, some people, it was a Depression, we didn't know any different. Our life didn't change at all,
Yeah, I think around here probably. Yeah, she was aware of it, but it was kind of life as usual.
Yeah, we were poor before the Depression, and now we're real poor. Yeah,
kind of. So that is, but that's a kind of unique perspective of where you are.
Yeah.
But I listened to that recording, and her voice was frail, but she was really recalling things very clearly. Probably because she didn't drink alcohol. But her recollection and her diction and the way she remembered things was just very clear and concise, and I learned so much. And, at that age, I was probably 16, you think you're twice as smart as your parents.
Oh, sure.
You got half the life experience as your parents. So the older I get, the older people I want to be around. People who are in their 20s, I can't hardly even stand being around because it's just such a generational gap. Just and I've always gotten along with people older than me. I've always, unless it's my parents, because you're always smarter than your parents, right? You think,
of course,
right? But it wasn't until I had kids and went through some of what they went through that I could even relate. Yeah, because you don't have that experience.
Yeah, I took a parenting class one time, and they showed the graphs, and, until age 10, 11, 12, they listen to their parents more than their peers. And then it goes the other way around. They don't listen to their parents at all. They listen to their peers. But then about 20, 21, 22, when they start having kids of their own, they start listening to their parents again. And there's a lot of truth there.
But you're at a different point in your life, too. And I still disagree with a lot of the policies my parents had, but at least I can see where they were coming from now. You're doing what you think is right to protect an individual, and
there's no manual when your kids are born.
I've still not got my parenting manual in.
I'm sure I made a lot of mistakes. Yeah, and we talk about it all the time. Different mistakes that our parents made. That, man, I would have never done that. But
I try and talk a lot about that on this podcast, about the differences of generations, because for me to you're very different than my grandpa's generation, and that's the oldest I go back. You remember a generation further than I do. What would have been my great grandparents, which died when I was pretty young, but you would have known them really well. or that generation, and just how the parenting with each generation changes so much. Like I'm sure your parents weren't big emotional talkers and talked through problems.
No, it wasn't.
What was it? What was that like? Where did you find your whatever, without parents talking to you about a lot of things? Where did you find out stuff?
Well, it's just from my peers more than anything. Sure, I mean, I learned from friends and stuff like that. My parents, I think my parents believed that it wasn't their job to be my friend.
Yeah,
it was their job to teach me and make me, to make a man out of a boy. That was Dad's job. And sure, we went fishing together and we did, stuff like that, but that wasn't the primary function in life. It was, I don't know. It's I sometimes appreciate that more. The older I get, and seeing some of the mistakes I made as a parent growing up, and thinking, I should have distanced myself a little bit more and not been, but who's to say?
Well, there's so many factors with every relationship, and there's no formula that works for everybody.
Yeah.
I feel like people have gotten to the point where they are friends with their kids now.
Sure.
And there's no line, and then there's I think as a parent, I want to be close to my kids, and I want to have commonalities, and I want to spend time with them.
Absolutely.
But at the end of the day, goddamn, I'm the dad.
Well,
and this is the standard.
Yeah, this is right, this is wrong, and as long as you respect me and everything, it's all gonna be fine. We can still be friends.
As a dad, this is my right and wrong. You don't have to agree with it, but as long as you're living here, kind of a thing.
Yeah. Now we got grandkids. We can treat them every time, however we want to, and we can be buddies with grandkids. It's all send them home and let mom and dad deal with it.
You don't have to deal with the consequences of it. I remember my mom told me when Don and Betty used to live next door to us, they used to have little Debbie snacks on a little plate. Mm-hmm. And my mom would always tell me, don't ask for anything when you go over there. I'm like seven or 8.
Mm-hmm.
And I always wanted those little Debbie cakes. But I wasn't allowed to ask for them. So I'd just walk around and say, boy, those little Debbie cakes look real tasty, Gramsy, Would you like to have one? Oh, I sure, I'd like to have one. Yeah. Kids learn to adapt to situations.
Jonathan was about a year old, maybe a year and a half, and we went to see my grandmother. I had a day off, and I was working in Tennessee, and we went down to Alabama to see her. Anyway, I'm visiting with Mamaw, and my aunt, Udale, had some funny names in that family. But anyway, she came and got Jonathan, took him home. So we went to her house, which was right next door, and we walked over there a little bit, and Jonathan never had much in the way of candy. We'd always tried to feed him well. We'd give him a treat every once in a while.
Right.
We went over there, and he had chocolate all over his face and hands and all over all her little trinkets and everything over there. I'm like, Udale, what do you know? Oh, he's just a boy, But it was quite a.
But you're talking about having, sweets as a treat.
Oh yeah.
Then
Mm-hmm.
And even I'm pretty lax. Like if the kids would go to the, on Saturday mornings, I used to go down to the gas station. I'll let them pick something out.
Sure.
But it's still kind of a treat. It's not something that happens every day, but it's at least once a week. I feel like that's pretty.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, or even more often. I see so many people that eat so much sugar nowadays, and you just got to wonder about the health, behind long-term health. Moderation is the key to everything.
It is.
But
it is.
But I see so many people that abuse it, and I'm sure we'll all die from something.
Yeah, well, none of us make it out of this alive. That's
right.
For sure.
Jim Sweeney and the Jump Shots wrote a song one time, said, if you drink, you're going to die. If you don't drink, you're going to die anyway. And then he went on to smoking and a lot of other verses to the song. But that was pretty interesting take on that. I don't know if you remember them. They played locally here for a while and then played in Tulsa. So
I don't
too.
remember him specifically. I know
Yeah.
the name, but so you were there when Mark Silva said he was going to come on the pod. You heard
Yeah,
him say that.
yeah, and I think Mark said something to your dad about having all three of us on here at one time, and so I don't know how.
That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
I want to get all three of you guys on here.
Yeah, get all three of us on here. You never know what kind of stories might get told. Because
We might have to edit all of it out.
Well,
but
yeah, you don't want some of that stuff. You'll know it.
What's funny is that Dad never really told me stories growing up. He was very not a talker of a dad. He was a good dad. He was a great dad.
And I've seen both extremes. I've seen parents that just do whatever they want to in front of their kids. I'm like, golly, an 8-year-old doesn't really need to be watching this. And then I've seen others that wouldn't tell them anything.
Yeah.
Like, it wouldn't.
Well, I'm kind of the opposite of my dad. Like, I tell my kids stories for better or worse. Like,
Sure.
Sometimes it's look at what an idiot I was.
Yeah.
But Dad just didn't tell me stories, and all the stories I have are from either you or Mark or guys that knew him. And then I'll ask Dad about him, and he'll say, "Oh yeah, this is kind of what happened." He'll tell it if you ask him about it, but he didn't volunteer a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, my dad was a lot the same way.
And I feel like we got an opportunity to get some stories on record in this day and age. It's so easy to just...
Yeah, I learned more about my dad when he was fishing with Uncle Harold.
Really?
They'd drink a few beers and fish,
And
and
start telling stories.
I'd start hearing stuff that like, you did that, really, Dad?
Could you imagine having a recording of it?
Oh,
Wouldn't you love to have that?
My dad's been gone for 22 years now, and it's hard. You can't replace
No.
that kind of stuff. It's
Well, when Grandpa Pat died, that was a big wake-up call for me. I think up until that point, I just thought I was going to be immortal. But then he was the head of the family. It's Grandpa, and now he's gone, and now Dad's next in line. So he's
and it comes a point. When Dad died, I still had Mom, and I'm not the top of the line.
Right.
And then she's been gone since 2011, and but when she died, it was a very finite wake up. I don't have anybody to call anymore. I don't have anybody to talk to. I've got brothers and I got peers and things like that.
Yeah.
But
that particular kind of relationship.
Having Mom, having
Parents.
Mom or Dad, one or the other, having a parent to say, I got a problem. What are we gonna do here?
Yeah.
And not that I really burdened her with much of that anyway, but it was still, you just didn't.
You knew they were there.
You knew that it was there.
Yeah.
If I had a financial crisis or something, it's like, hey, Mom, I need some help.
Yeah.
And now you don't have it anymore. And it's
Yeah, I don't even like thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause I was very
it'll
close
happen.
to my grandma, and when Grandpa died, he was kind of my last
Mm-hmm.
connection to somebody that loved her on that level, and it really made me realize how finite this life really is.
Oh, it is.
Even if I'm only halfway through it, it's, how fast did that first half go? I remember people telling me when we had kids, oh, it goes by fast, appreciate every moment. And you're young, and you're thinking, oh, that's nonsense.
You can only appreciate so much, every moment. I mean, we all have our lives to lead and all that kind of stuff. We're all distracted with everything, but you do want to, you want to let life play out, basically, and watch it. It's quite a ride. Has been for me so far. If I, die on the way home, I have nothing to complain about. I've had 64 pretty good years. I've got nothing to, it's like somebody comes by and gives you $100 bill every day.
Yeah.
And then one day they stop. You gonna complain that they didn't bring you the $100 bill, or are you gonna be thankful that they brought you a $100 bill
for so long?
For so long, it's all in how you
That's
how you
a
look
really
at
good
things.
perspective. I've actually been struggling with something in my life regarding to that,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a good perspective.
Well, you got to learn to appreciate the good and be thankful for it. it's there's a Bible passage in Ecclesiastes where he says, I looked and observed and beheld a great evil under the sun, which under the sun just refers to life in the flesh. And it said that men were given all the desires of their heart, but they weren't given the ability to enjoy them. You know, they've given all this stuff, yet they still complain that they don't have more.
Right.
And I'm paraphrasing a lot. That's not a quote, but it's
you have pretty good biblical recall. Do you do Bible study or something?
not lately. I used to watch televangelists and read myself and do Bible studies with different community groups and stuff at the church I was going with and stuff. But it's mostly just memory. When I put something in my memory, I usually, as long as I store it properly, I will remember it. I will remember it.
Have you always been a religious guy?
No, not at all. I mean, Mom took me to church when I was a little boy and everything. You know, I was told that this is right and this is wrong and all that kind of stuff. But as far as when I was younger, I always believed that God created the heavens and the earth and mankind and everything else. But I believed that He just kind of created it and then stood back and watched it all happen.
Right.
You know, I didn't believe in providence. I didn't believe that He had any kind of directory, you know, presence, you know, at all. And now I'm much more into that. He's got His eye on us all. He's watching.
What made you switch to that perspective?
A lot of it is just seeing things that He's done in my life, and I can't think of really specific examples, but just things that shouldn't have worked out that way, you know, but they did.
Yeah.
And any inspiration, I mean, the word inspiration comes from the Greek God breathed. And you've got a problem, just like what I was talking about with the motorcycle earlier. You know, I'm laying in bed and my motorcycle won't run. I can't figure it out. And where did that come from? I don't know how this engine works. But somehow something got breathed into my mind, and I don't really know. And like I said, that's not a real good example. There's better.
No, it's a great example, actually. Do you feel like you're tapping into something?
Sure.
So, like, you're a good mechanic. I'm a songwriter, right? There'll be times when I'll sit down and I'll write something, and I'll need the solution. How do I write this chorus? How do I get this to go from here to here? And I feel like I'll tap into something.
Absolutely.
And maybe I'm writing it, but I'm getting some kind of divine, and I don't know that that's God.
Well, it's a spiritual
but it's some
thing.
kind of connection where it clicks, and this is where I need to go. Because with every chord progression, there's unlimited options. You can do any melody, right? You could have 10 people
mathematical
write
infinity.
a melody to the same chord progression, and they'd all 10 come up with something different. So what's the right one? And I'm always confident this is what I want to do.
And there's several right ones, probably. It's just a matter of coming up with
but how do you tap into that? But I think we're talking about the same thing.
Oh, I do too.
Because you're on that level of understanding, and so maybe we tap into a God energy or another dimension or something.
Once again, I mean, it's a spiritual energy, and you know where it comes from. I don't begin to understand it by any stretch, but I believe that it's there.
We're capable of being able to understand.
Yeah.
You know, they say there are 11 dimensions, and we're in the third dimension. You know, you got up, down, left, right, and we're occupying both spaces. But what does a fourth dimensional being look like to us? We can't comprehend that, but to them we look simple. So you go up 11 dimensions. Imagine that's where God is. We can't even comprehend
look at how far mankind has come in the last 100 years as far as intellectual.
How about the last 20 years?
Yeah. That's what I'm getting at. Is that
Yeah.
if time is irrelevant and intelligence is infinite, and we're down here at a 0.1% of that infinite number. I mean, we're it's just infinity's hard to grasp.
It's
and
impossible to
if
grasp for us. Yeah.
And if we can relate to all that, I mean, where does that put us and where does that put God?
Yeah.
Our thoughts are not his thoughts and our ways are not his ways. We are his creation, and I'm sure he loves us and he's proud of us and all that, and a lot of things that we do. When we do well, I'm sure that there's a lot of times he goes, yeah, that's my boy. And then there's other times he goes,
And maybe that's kind of part of the freedom aspect, is you have to let humanity fail in order to become stronger.
Parenting.
So
that's one of the things I was talking about, the parenting class.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to let your kids fail.
kids fail, yeah.
Let them
well,
fail.
I feel like that's something parents aren't even willing to consider anymore.
No.
My kid can't.
Don't want
fail.
them to ever cry. Don't want them to ever be disappointed.
Right, they
Don't
gotta
ever
be comfortable all the time.
Sure.
And my generation of kids, your grandkids, are way more comfortable than I was. I was way more comfortable than you were, and you were it just it keeps getting easier, and that kind of scares me.
Well,
I don't know if a hot civil war could ever happen in this country. I don't know if people are.
I don't think they expected it in 1855 either. I really don't. But by 1862, I think they kind of knew it was coming.
But do you think things were more barbaric back then? I mean, things were a little more. People were used to blood and violence a little more back then, weren't they? Do you think?
Probably.
The grit of life.
Yeah.
Harder times.
Yeah. I mean, they were more agricultural. They raised animals and killed them to eat
animals and cut meat.
Yeah.
We're so desensitized to everything now, and that's why I say I don't know that
steak comes from the grocery store. It's not. It wasn't an animal. No. So.
Do you think a civil war could happen? A hot one in this country?
It's really hard for me to visualize that. It's not something
it is for me too.
I've not. I mean, it can happen, and it can happen. World War I started accidentally.
Yeah.
The old boy was sent to assassinate.
Yeah.
The guy, and he failed, and Archduke Ferdinand's car had a flat around the corner.
Yeah.
And so he's able to catch up to him and kill him. And it's like, that, and then that was an accident.